Good afternoon. My name is Erin Colburn. I'm the Pre-Health Advising Coordinator for the College of Health Sciences here at Boise State University. I'm excited to introduce Shannon Kerr, our other pre-health advisor, who we reached out to Idaho State University's physical therapy program, and Tyler Jepson will be sharing some really great information about the career of physical therapy, Idaho State University, and then he has also brought some of his wonderful students to share their perspective. So I'm going to hand off to them, and please note that we'll have a place for question and answer as well. But if you think of a question, you can put it in the chat or raise your hand, and we can make sure that we get that answered. All right, take it away, Tyler.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. I'm happy to be back. This is the second time, I believe, that we've done this specifically this year for BSU students. So I'm going to just show you a few quick slides about the ISU program, and then I'll introduce you to my wonderful third-year students, and they can give you their perspective on getting into and preparing for physical therapy. So hopefully you can all see my screen at this point, or my shared slides. So here's my contact information. Feel free to email me, tylerjepson@isu.edu, if you guys ever have any questions. Full disclosure, I am not on the admissions committee, so I'm going to tell you my perspective from what I believe a PT student should, or a prospective PT student should look like, but I am not. I do not have influence over who is admitted to our program and who is not. But I can walk you through some of our prerequisites and give you my take and give you my advice that I've given to many of the pre-physical therapy students that I have advised over the years. When I worked in the clinic, I loved having pre-PT students come in and observe and get their observation hours because they were so excited about physical therapy, and I wanted them to be excited about PT as well. I've already messed up my credentials. It should say GCS. I'm a geriatric certified specialist is actually what that should say, GCS. And that means that I have spent a lot of time and a lot of energy working with older adults, and then gone through a voluntary process of becoming board certified in geriatrics, which there are many other types of board certifications you can get within physical therapy. And I'm happy to discuss those, but that's not necessarily the focus of my presentation. I just happened to notice the error in my slide. You can find a lot more information about our program at isu.edu/PT, and I'll be sharing some of that information with you as well. So becoming a student or becoming a PT through Idaho State University, I'll give you a little background. Our program actually was going to celebrate its 30th anniversary, I believe, just this year, this past September. Unfortunately, COVID has interfered with some of those celebration activities, but the PT program has been around for 30 years. We have expanded to the Meridian campus. So ISU has actually had a Meridian campus / Boise campus for over 10 to 15 years, something like that. Before my time, I was hired on in 2017 as we were expanding over to Meridian. And I'm here now in this wonderful, beautiful space. If you're ever in the area along Locust Grove and the freeway, we're right next door to a big, tall building called ICOM, which is the new medical school, or Doctor of Osteopathy school. They are in essentially what used to be our parking lot next door to us. We're in the same building as Renaissance High School as well. However, something that's very exciting is that ISU has actually purchased 20+ acres north of our current location, and our current location is probably 2 acres. And so ISU has purchased 20-some acres north of where we are currently, and so there's a huge opportunity for growth. And so the ISU campus in Meridian, which is just graduate programs within the Division of Health Sciences, has done nothing but grow and grow and grow. Even though enrollment around the country for higher education seems to be going down, the graduate school, and specifically the health programs within the graduate school here in Meridian, has been doing nothing but growing. So that's very exciting. There are 12 full-time faculty within the PT program. split in between the two campuses. And so that's a pretty high student to faculty ratio, or high faculty to student ratio, I should say. And we have many lab instructors and adjunct instructors who are from the community that come in and help out with our program as well. Many of which are also serve as mentors during clinical internships, or what we call clinical affiliations. Our classrooms, we do utilize Zoom technology, but pre-COVID, and hopefully someday again when COVID is over, we actually have physical classrooms where the students are in a space together and they can see each other, on their respective campuses. And we have, I think fairly good distance learning technology where there's relatively good audio visual that allows the two campuses to interact, usually relatively well. That takes some getting used to, and I'll let my students kind of speak about that. But that has been something that has been very impressive to me, and I think everyone is anxious to get back to that because it does give us this connection to other folks at the other campus, but it also allows for interpersonal interactions when we are physically in the same space, even though it's split in between the two campuses. One good thing that I think for those of you who are at BSU currently, this doesn't really apply to you, but you're all paying in-state tuition currently, I'm assuming. If you aren't right now, you probably will be, which is a huge savings. If you ever do have any individuals coming from out of state to apply to our program, I believe the rules have changed, and Aaron and Shannon can probably tell you way more about this, where it's a lot easier to get in-state residency than it used to be. At one point, it became a little bit more difficult, but then now it's back to being relatively easy again, which is important for the pocketbook. We've had some pretty impressive alumni, I believe. So we've actually had some former graduates that have gone on to the National Institute of Health and completed fellowships there. One of our alumni is in leadership for our national professional organization called the American Physical Therapy Association, which is a huge, huge organization, and it's our professional organization. The past couple of years, our national conferences will have upwards of, I want to say 17,000 plus PTs will all gather in one spot on an annual basis. And it is an amazing, really fun time where we all get together and do continuing education together, have conferences and amazing network opportunities. And so the APTA is a very large organization and a very powerful organization, luckily, because they're advocates at the national and at local levels for us. And we have alums that are within the leadership of that organization. We have very good relationships with our clinical partners, which I kind of mentioned. Some of the local PTs who come into our program also will then serve as what we call clinical instructors, where our students are required to go into a clinic and complete a full-time, you might say an internship for 8 weeks at a time. These individuals, we have very strong relationships with individuals locally in Boise and in the Pocatello area. And so we have a pretty good variety and access to these local physical therapists. We do have access to individuals outside of the area, but that gets to be a little bit tougher and tougher. But what's nice about being the only PT program in the state is that we have a good relationship with many of the in-state PTs that are used to working with our program. All right. So I mentioned the APTA, or the American Physical Therapy Association. There is some, let me see if I can pull up the website. Oops, I'm gonna stop sharing and share a different screen so that I can show you some of the information that you can find on their website. So the APTA will have some general information for prospective physical therapy or pre-physical therapy students. And this website can be extremely helpful for when you are shopping around for programs. And I encourage you, look at ISU's program, but look at, other programs around the country as well, because there's a lot. So there is a list of all the programs in the country. but then there's also going to be some good resources as far as what are some general guidelines that most of these schools are going to be requiring for their prerequisites. Now, each individual school is going to have a different set of prerequisites, but they're going to, have a lot of overlap. Most PT schools in the country are going to use something called a centralized application process. And our version of that is called PTCAS. PTCAS is this amazing tool that didn't exist when I was applying to PT school, but PTCAS is a portal where you can submit an application and you can literally check. If you wanted to check every single PT program in the nation, you could. You could apply to every single PT program in the nation, or all the ones that participate in the PTCAS, which I believe is the majority of them. Now, there's a fee associated with each school, and so it's not really financially probably a good idea to apply to every single PT program in the nation, but it really helps facilitate the application to multiple schools, because that's usually a strategy that many students engage in, just in case they have their the top whatever 1, 2, 3 schools, and I'll maybe have my students kind of chime in at some point and say, this is how many schools I applied to when I was looking for programs. Something that I think would have been very, very useful for me, because back in the day you had to sift through many different universities processes, and they were all very different. So look into that PTCAS system, because like I said, it's going to provide you with a centralized location for all of your application needs for schools around the country. Okay, get back to sharing the other screen. Zoom likes to take away my bars and hide them. You'd think after so many years of teaching over Zoom now, I would have it down, but it always poses a challenge. So I was going to talk about ISU's requirements specifically, and you can find those here. So here are the ISU's specific requirements, and then the page I was just also showing you was here. And I think what I'll do as well is I can provide a copy of this PowerPoint presentation to Aaron and Shannon if you guys want access to it. I don't have a whole lot in here, but some of these hyperlinks might be useful. So if you go to this website, it will take you to our specific requirements. Most of those are going to be pretty straightforward, so I'll let you kind of look at that one on your own. So you're going to have a certain number of letters of reference. You're going to have to complete certain courses, and you're going to have to get certain grades in those courses, and those are all listed there for you. One of the challenging things for most pre-PT students this year as well as last year is this requirement, the hours of observation. Getting those hours in can be very difficult right now because COVID is closing the doors to many observation students. Now, this used to be a requirement for almost every single PT program in the country. Now, the exact number has varied from school to school, but most schools have required a certain number. Our accrediting body or our organizations have kind of told all the schools across the country, hey, cut some students some slack. So this is kind of a canned statement. Try to get as many observation hours as you can, get them in a wide variety of settings, not just all in an outpatient orthopedic clinic, but if you can get them in a couple different settings, that would be great. But if you don't meet these minimum requirements, it doesn't mean you're going to be automatically disqualified, which was the case in the past. And speaking of which, if you are, when you go to apply, be sure you are meeting every single requirement, because the system will just automatically kick out, you won't know this, but the system will automatically kind of put your application in, I won't want to say a garbage can, but it'll put it over here if you don't meet all the minimum requirements. If you're missing 3 courses that are required and you're not going to take them for another 2 years, I would say you're probably better off saving your money, because it costs money to go through the application process, and wait until you have all of your prerequisites completed, because you're probably not going to get anywhere within the system. with the exception of these observation hours. Now, each school is going to be handling these in a different case-by-case basis. So you should see a statement on somewhere on that particular school's website regarding their observation hours requirement. This is what ISU's says, which I kind of, oh, here. This is what it used to say. This is what it says right now. So try to get as many hours as you can, but you're not automatically disqualified. So if you have contacts or if you have relationships with physical therapists already, I highly recommend that you kind of, leverage those relationships to see what facilities and what sites are open to observation students so that you can get these hours. Now, if you have worked as a physical therapy aide, or sometimes in Idaho we call them techs, that is amazing experience and you can count those towards observation. But if you've worked in a clinic for a year or two, you have way more than the minimum number of hours. And definitely use those, and cite those on your application process, but you're going to want to branch out of, that particular setting. If it was in a general outpatient orthopedic clinic setting, then you're going to want some other observation hours in some other settings like pediatrics or inpatients or skilled nursing facilities, if you can find those, if those are available to you. Admissions expectations. Don't just do the minimum. These are now my personal recommendations. Meeting the minimum is kind of like the equivalent of, we're going to abide by the law. Hopefully, we're going to do more than just abide by the law. Hopefully, we're going to go above and beyond the floor. And so be creative in how you are crafting your resume or any of your admission materials. If you had a previous job or a volunteer experience that doesn't directly seem PT related, I highly encourage you to think about what abilities and skills did you need to demonstrate, excuse me, in those positions that could translate into being a good PT. Retail is an excellent example. If you have a lot of experience in retail or maybe being a server at a restaurant, that is customer service. And you should be highlighting your experience and your expertise, or your skill set in customer service, because in physical therapy, you need a high level of customer service in order to be successful. So as you're, like I said, crafting your admissions materials, try to take a holistic approach to your previous experiences and think about how those non-PT skills can translate into skills that actually would be beneficial for physical therapists. And if you need inspiration on that, I highly recommend that you chat with a physical therapist and say, hey, I have a background in music. How could that lead to a stronger physical therapy program application? And we would all be very happy to share our thoughts on that. PTs are generally very nice people, and they're people. They like talking to people, and they like working with patients and students and other PTs. So don't be afraid to cold call somebody as well. That's another piece of advice. We probably need more cold calling in our industry. And this is for my students, this is advice for you guys as well. If you need a mentor, if you need someone to give you some advice, and they might live on the other side of the country, and you want to, become like them, call them up and say, hey, how did your journey bring you here to where you are today? And 99.9% of the time, they will be happy to tell you and give you advice about whatever it is that you want to know. Okay. Other examples, public speaking. So, take advantage of your speech courses. Much of your undergraduate experience is, and as well as your PT experience, PT school experiences, you get out of it what you put into it. So, take that for what it's worth. But if you put a lot of effort into things like the Special Olympics or the Big Brothers Big Sisters, that can actually be very beneficial for for you later on in getting into PT school, but then also figuring out what you want to do after PT school, because that may actually inform some of your passion. If your passion is to work with individuals that maybe require adaptive, or that engage in adaptive sports, if you go up to Bogus Basin and you're working with individuals who maybe have amputations, then that could be a great direction for you to go after graduation, and may inform something that you might inform a future specialty of yours. Another good one, learn how to learn. Some of the students that I see struggle the most, and this is historically speaking, are the students that kind of float through undergrad. They get good grades relatively easily without a lot of studying, and then they get to grad school and it's a slap in the face because they have not developed the habits and the study skills necessary to survive graduate school. So if you're someone who has fought tooth and nail for C's and B's or A's, then chances are you have actually developed the study skills necessary to make it in graduate school. But if you have floated through undergraduate school, then you're going to want to take a good, long, hard look at your study habits and be prepared to ramp those up significantly. And again, I'm going to have my students speak to that. And I would love to hear their take on comparing and contrasting undergraduate coursework to graduate coursework. So with that transition, I'll let them chime in and begin speaking. They're so tired of hearing me talk, and I'm tired of hearing me talk. Let's have someone else speak.
So maybe you could each introduce yourself and maybe indicate where you attended undergraduate, and then answer the question, what's the difference between going to an undergraduate experience and going to a PT program? Amanda?
Hello, I'm Amanda. I went to Boise State. I graduated in 2019. The main difference for me for undergrad to grad school is probably it's more clinically applicable information, which as it should be, but throughout courses you are using more information that's going to help you hands-on. So you learn something in class and then you actually go and do it, and it's like, oh, that was kind of cool. Whereas in undergrad, I feel like you kind of learn these basic foundations of knowledge and you just have to know it for tests. With grad school, you have to be able to apply it hands-on in practicals and in the clinic.
I'll jump in. Excuse me. So my name's Kevin. I got my undergraduate degree at Idaho State University. And in addition to what Amanda said, I think the biggest differences between undergrad and graduate school for me was undergraduate, you were usually in a classroom with like hundreds of other students. It was pretty cutthroat because everybody's trying to get good grades to get on to graduate school or just to graduate in general. Whereas the graduate program, it's really nice. We've got a good size. We have about 23 students here in Meridian, and it's like we've all made it to grad school. And so now we're here to help each other and learn instead of trying to outdo each other. So really utilize your classmates because we all have different backgrounds and techniques. And then I think Tyler hit on the point, your study habits change. I was able to print off our professor's PowerPoints, study those, be able to recall in a test, but now I had to adapt and not only just try to memorize it, but learn critical thinking skills. And with a flexible profession as physical therapy, there's multiple ways to approach one problem and to be able to reason and demonstrate your reasoning of what you do in your clinical practice.
Jordan?
You go, McKenna.
All right, you can go. I'll go.
No worries. Yeah, so my name is Jordan. I am a graduate from Boise State, graduated in 2018. kind of addressing how undergrad differs from like being in the PT program. Big thing for me is probably like my study habits. I used to be a huge procrastinator back in undergrad, and I could get away with it. So that was super nice back in the day. But now, just due to the amount of workload and just kind of the concepts and everything like that, the material, it requires you to work a lot more in advance in order to maximize the understanding and benefit you get from the lectures and material. So that was a big thing. And then kind of what they already touched on is like you're able to apply what you're learning, and not only apply it when you're out in the clinic, but apply it from one class to another. It really, there's a compounding effect in where you have this kind of basis and foundation of material and subjects, and that translates into more advanced courses and more complex courses. So that's definitely a big thing.
All right. Can everyone hear me? Because my AirPods were being weird earlier. So, all right, cool. So my name is McKenna. I graduated from Boise State as well. And so kind of going off of what all these guys have said, some of the differences I've come to notice, it's way more specific than undergrad, especially for physical therapy, because you're probably taking certain exercise classes, or if you're in health science, general health classes, you got all your general classes like chemistry, physics, and whatnot. But once you get into PT school, you're applying everything from that. So it's actually useful to have like physics and chemistry and like exercise physiology from undergrad. You'll use a lot of that from in PT school. Someone mentioned the class size. I think Kevin mentioned the class sizes. We're all like really good friends, which is awesome. It's been a big help for me personally. A great way to have a good support from other classmates, where you might have a couple friends in your undergrad classes, but they might be too big to really know everyone. Then it is quite a bit busier. I was able to work actually full time in undergrad and somewhat succeed in undergrad. But now I had to pull back and I'm only working part-time. There's no way I could work full-time at this point. So those are just a few things that I thought of, but otherwise I think three others covered it pretty well.
Thank you. And as you guys were chatting, I also kind of thought about the difference between undergraduate and graduate. Is we have these professional standards. These professional standards like our code of ethics, or core values, and these things called generic abilities or professional behaviors. And so the sandbox skills, not just the technical aspects that you're tested on, your technical knowledge in undergraduate, but once you're in PT school, especially when you're on like internships, you're essentially assessed on how well you play in the sandbox. And so those skills are extremely important. They're very difficult to quantify, and they're very difficult to measure, and they're very difficult to translate through the application process. But nonetheless, they're probably some of the most important skills that you can develop and hopefully illustrate or highlight while you are in the PT program. Any advice, McKenna, Amanda, Kevin, Jordan, on the application process? What did, it's been a while since I applied to PT school, so could you guys talk to how you, what advice you would give to someone applying to PT school? We'll go in reverse order, McKenna.
Okay, for that, I would say get A's and B's. Try hard, don't, I mean, and if you have to retake classes, that's great. I probably spent my last year retaking quite a few classes, and you know, I still got in. But if you can avoid retaking classes, that's money saved, time saved. So just work hard. You can all get the A's and B's. Just apply yourself, and that's the biggest thing I'd say, because those type of things are what they look for. And so if you don't have them, if you even have a C in 1 or 2 classes, you may not get in. Even if it says you don't technically need, or like it might say you need a C or above, that's, you know, so you can still apply, but if you don't have those higher grades, it's probably less likely, is from what I get out of it. So.
Yeah, definitely. To be honest, I don't remember very well the details of applying for PT. I think a part of me kind of extracted that from my brain just due to the horror. No, I'm kidding. It's not that bad. So a couple things I will say though is, one, when the application does open, start early. Start as early as you can. There are a few components to work through, and the more time you have on your hands to complete them and kind of space them out to do it, it'll be a lot less stressful for you. So that's definitely a big thing. While you're in school and while you're still taking classes in your undergrad, get to connect with the professors you have there, form relationships, be able to you know, go in on their office hours, or, you know, just form some sort of rapport with them, because when you do apply, you do need some references and letters of rec. I think letters of rec technically. And I believe it depends on the school, but I'm pretty sure for Idaho State, we needed at least one from a professor. Is that right?
Yeah, 2 PTs and 1 academic or supervisory professional.
Yeah, definitely. So if you can, definitely try to connect with a professor. I'm sure I know in my experience, I had a favorite professor. So going in, just whether it's for the class or just outside of the class, it definitely helps. And then like McKenna said, just take what your classes are doing and take them seriously. Just to, obviously you want to learn the content because you're paying for it, but also, you know, the grades definitely help. And kind of what I think we kind of touched on earlier, it's going to translate to your undergrad, to this program, especially like those basic foundation classes. So yeah, I think that's kind of all I got.
McKenna and Jordan
Open
did
it up to the room for some questions in terms of the students. I know that, so were any of you not from Idaho? So was anybody like from another state? So maybe you could talk a little bit about the tuition situation and the residency piece, maybe a little bit, just because we do have some people in the room who are not actually from Idaho originally, who are at Boise State University. Maybe you could answer that with that. I know there's a student in the room that has that question.
I can talk on that. So with Idaho, at least when I applied, it was if you went to a 4-year public university and graduated from there, so Boise State, and you applied within 3 years of graduating, then you could apply for in-state tuition. And so if I remember correctly, I think I had to like get transcripts to show that I was at Boise State for all 4 years. I had to show a lease for a year. I had to get something notarized. I don't remember what it was. I just know I had to go do that. And it wasn't a terrible process. Just do it early, because I remember being like, oh my gosh, this isn't going to get done by the time my first payment is going to be due. And so I was a little bit worried about having to like wait out a year. And then I could be wrong on this, so Tyler, correct me, but I think if you are in a graduate program in Idaho, you get resident status after 1 year. So you could at least apply for resident in-state tuition after 1 year at Idaho State.
Yeah, and Tyler put something in the chat for those of you who are not from Idaho. If you're interested in Idaho State University, the information about the residency policy. And they did lift the regulations or the process for professional and graduate schools in Idaho that you could gain that residency in 1 year to cut the cost. So thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, and if you know, like ISU is the one for me, you know, or whatever state you're going to go to, maybe you move there early just to get that residency, because I don't know if any of you paid. I'd have to go look it up. Typically the difference between out-of-state tuition and in-state tuition is very large, and save money if you can.
Questions
Just to
from the
So
students?
just to clarify, so you pay the first year, it's non-resident tuition, and then you can pay resident tuition after you apply.
I believe if you are, to summarize, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe if you move out of state and start the PT program here at ISU, your first year would be out of state tuition, but then after a year of being in the program, you would qualify for residency, and then you would have in-state tuition for the final 2 years of the program.
And what Amanda was sharing about was the opportunity that if you attended Boise State University or an Idaho school for a full 4 years, that there's some paperwork you can fill out to not have to wait the year to have to pay the out-of-state to it, and you wouldn't have to pay the out-of-state tuition. But she's saying the same words that I've heard twice now. Twice I've heard the words early. Yes. Early. It's so important. Be proactive about this process because you don't want to wait till the last minute. Garrett has a question. I was wondering how many programs everyone applied for and how many volunteer hours did you have? And do you recommend volunteer hours?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So Tyler kind of alluded to it. Some programs do have, like Idaho State, for example, has 80. Some schools I were looking at had upwards to 100. I think maybe one had even 200 hours. So using that keyword early, the earlier you can start. I mean, I didn't have COVID to worry about during all this. This was a few years ago, but the earlier you can get in on a clinic and get some experience, I highly recommend it. Or if you work as an aide or tech, I highly recommend it because for me, it helped me really see what physical therapy was all about. I had an idea, and then to go in and see what it was like, it actually like made me more excited to become a physical therapist. So yeah, the earlier you can get on that, the better, whether it's volunteer or getting a job as a tech, and then diversifying your volunteering. And then the other question, I got about 200 hours of volunteer service in a geriatric or a skilled nursing setting, and then your typical outpatient orthopedic setting as well.
Kevin, how many schools did you apply to when you applied?
I want to say like 5 or 6 I went to, but yeah, the more the better because it is a very competitive application process. So, I mean, obviously it can get pretty pricey the more you apply, but the more you diversify as well. So if you apply earlier, actually some schools, if you apply earlier, they'll refund your application fee. One of my schools did that. So
I could jump in on that too. So I had 135 hours at 2 different locations. I would highly recommend if you can get a job as an aide, even part-time, that might help you in your experience for your clinical rotations and your experience as a PT. In general, I did not work as an aide, and even though those observation hours were just, I mean, they were great. It made me really excited, but I didn't get to do a lot. It was just a lot of standing around. So I got to my first clinical rotation, and I felt like my therapeutic exercise skills were basically non-existent. I mean, I knew maybe how to work out myself, but I didn't have very many exercises in my bank to pull from. So that was the learning curve for me. So if you can get a job and that works for you, that's a great idea. Otherwise, just yeah, get those hours, try to get more than 80. I saw a couple questions for getting hours during a pandemic. I'm sure if you email some outpatient, just start emailing outpatient clinics and see if they're willing to take on an undergrad student. Most are, I'm sure. And if you want specific, I mean, just Google physical therapy Boise, and you'll probably find plenty of clinics out there that are willing to take you. And then,
and I would say don't email them. I would say go in or call them. Like, I know that using the phone is probably foreign to most of you in this generation, and actually calling and talking to somebody. But right now they're being bombarded with information. And if you just email them, your email may get lost in the train of thought. And if this is important enough to you, go into the office and say, hey, I don't know if you have a few minutes to talk, but I'm interested in seeing if I can help or if I can come in there. But if you email it, it kind of sends a message that you don't care as much. But if you make an effort to call and at least ask, then you're not feeling like you're not getting heard. So I would use your phone or I would go in person. So
I'll add something to that.
Tour as well.
Jordan, you were going to add something?
Yeah. I would recommend going in person and wearing something professional. You know, make an impression early. Even though it's something that doesn't seem very significant when you're just trying to get volunteer hours, making an impression and trying to, you know, establish yourself as someone who is taking this very seriously is huge. I was working as an aide or tech, whatever you want to call it, for Mountain Land, which is a PT system, I guess, or rehab system here in the Treasure Valley. And we had someone come in and volunteer, very professional. And what happened was when I left that clinic to start this PT program, she was able to go from being a shadow or a volunteer and was able to take my aid and tech position. And so just because they already had that connection and she was able to establish herself as a serious professional, she was able to take my spot, which was huge. And then she's actually in the ISU program now as a second year. So it starts as something as simple as just trying to go get your shadowing hours, but it can develop into something a lot better that will help you through the application process.
Amanda?
So going off that, I actually had that exact experience where I went in as a volunteer and they had an aide get a different job. And so they hired me like that day. And I was like, whoa, I feel like I don't know anything. But it was actually for, I don't know what programs you guys are in, but I was in the kinesiology department and it was for my internship that I had to do. And so I went in thinking, oh, I'm just going to get my 3 credits worth of internship hours. And because I got hired, I worked a full summer there and was upwards of like 200 or 300 hours, which is really nice. So if you haven't gotten to your internship, if you have one for your program at Boise State, I recommend looking into being an aide or volunteer to utilize those hours if you are interested in PT. And then I also used some service learning opportunities. I can't remember what classes they were in now, but a few of those I used ISMI, like the Aqua Ability program at Boise State, just trying to use like things that you already have lined up at Boise State for you as hours. And then with the calling and like going in person, I called from February to September to get inpatient hours. And I got 1 response. Actually, I ended up getting 2 responses, but it was a month before the application was due. And I was just like super stressed about it because a lot of my schools required inpatient hours. And I ended up doing one inpatient on every Wednesday for a month and one inpatient every Friday for a month, which was kind of nice to get like 2 different views at the same time. I know that's not as feasible right now with COVID, but with doing it early, I did it the month before the application was due, and the PT I was shadowing, which is funny because now she's one of our professors, you have to get them to sign off on your hours. And 2 days before the application is due, I'm emailing her and calling her like crazy, like, please sign my hours, please sign my hours. I need to turn this in. And so if you can do it and call now as whatever level you guys are in school, junior, sophomore, I highly recommend doing that so you're not as stressed right before you hit submit on PTCAS.
Kevin? Thanks, Amanda.
Sorry, I was answering a question in the chat. I don't know how, so like I said, I went to school in Utah, and it seemed like a lot of tech or aid jobs had emphasis on getting a basic life support or BLS certification, which covers like CPR, AED training, things like that. So it was difficult for me to land an aid job until I got that. Plus, you need it for school anyway, so it wouldn't hurt to kind of get that for your applying, and your certification lasts for about 2 years. So just wanted to throw that in there as well.
What's the best part about being a PT student?
They're going to say
Finally,
nothing right now.
well, no. For me, it's finally having an end in sight. When I was an undergrad, I was always stressing like if I'm not in PT school, then like what am I supposed to do? And like I didn't feel like I could go very many other places because I kind of felt like everything I did led to really just get me into PT school, but it didn't really allow me to like maybe branch out if I didn't get in. So being in has definitely helped me feel more secure as far as my future goes. However, we still have to pass boards and stuff, which is coming up, and practice board exams and stuff. And so
Got this. You got it.
even though, yeah, I'm always going to be stressed, so it doesn't really matter, but that's just me.
I would say the best part about being a PT student is for me was having that first patient have like significant improvement, like having that feeling where you were a part of a patient's treatment and then they are significantly better and you helped make an impact on their daily life in a positive manner. So having that was like one of the coolest feelings for me, because it kind of supported the reason why I chose this profession and learning through this program to get to the end goal of being a PT. And it's not a standard desk job, which is sick. Like you get to be challenged in so many different ways, and you get to be hands-on and connect with people and, learn about life in so many different ways. And it's frustrating, but it's rewarding. So it's a really cool profession. Something that's so diverse in so many ways. There's so many routes you can go. Like Tyler said, he's got his GCS, so he specializes more in the geriatric population. There's so many different routes. You can go into sports. You can go into more like wound care. You can go into an inpatient or an outpatient. There's so many different routes you can go, and it's kind of basically up to you on how you want to adapt and kind of gear your career to what fits you and what you think you'll enjoy the most and have the best impact on.
Yeah, I think my favorite part is the camaraderie you have. We're a we're a tight knit group with our cohort over here in Meridian. When we were still doing in-person classes, our very first semester of PT school, we had a little Word doc that had funny quotes. I unintentionally filled up about like 75% of those the first semester because I don't think before I speak, but that's a different story. But I also like the hands-on. I'm a visual learner, so to be able to, learn these things and then to get to practice on each other, and then to go out on an internship and have a patient, and you can be like, oh my gosh, I learned about this. I know what to do, and then it works, and you're like, oh my gosh, maybe I do know what I'm doing. All those blood, sweat, and tears pouring over notes are paying off, and yeah, I just like the flexibility behind the decision making, being able to attack it from multiple ways, and yeah, it's really fun.
I would definitely second McKenna's "the end is in sight." 7 years of college is a lot, but it's been really rewarding, like with what Jordan and Kevin were talking about too, going through so much school and you actually get to work with a patient that's unfortunately in pain, and you get to make a difference. Especially because when I was a patient in PT, that was huge to me. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to become a PT, is because I thought they impacted my life so much. So being able to do that even as a student, like on our clinical rotations, is really cool. And I'm really excited to only have 7 more weeks of school left ever.
Never say never. You never know. You might decide that you want more. So I love PT school. I loved it, and that kind of echo what they said. Some of my best friends to this day, 16 plus years later, I still consider some of them my best friends from PT school. So I just want to follow up on a few things I saw in chat. Most graduate programs are actually going to recommend that you don't work. In our handbook, it says that we discourage students from working because the workload that we are giving you is so heavy. Can students work? Yes, I've seen it done. Will it be distracting from your studies? Probably. But you have to do what you got to do. But consider that when budgeting for the next 3 years, when you guys are admitted into a PT program. There was a question about vacation. Same thing. I would highly discourage vacations, especially your very first semester. I think, well, really almost any semester. If you get behind by a week, you will be doing nothing but playing catch up for the next however many weeks are left in the semester. And I think at any given point, most of these guys, PT students, feel behind as it is without having missed time. So I would, if you're a very, very strong student with high organizational skills, maybe you could pull it off, but I would be very leery of that. Shannon had a good question about, what are some ways that you can get observation hours? I'm going to say be creative. Think outside the box of PT. I shadowed an athletic trainer in my observation, which was actually extremely useful. Consider shadowing other disciplines. So much, we do not work in a vacuum. So much of what we do is a part of a healthcare team. And so if you have the opportunity to go hang out with some other rehab professional, I would highly encourage that. And then look for those connections and those intersections with PT from those other disciplines. I think that would be very useful. And then you have to tell us about that. You have to kind of, illustrate that in your, letter or your admission materials. There's a question, how did our enrollment change when we expanded? We went from enrolling about 24 students a cohort, and we doubled it. We now admit 48 students in a cohort. And that's all I had.
There's another one in the chat that I think qualifies to you or Aaron or Shannon. Emily asked if there's any word on whether or not standardized tests have been brought back.
Oh, so I'm actually in faculty senate for ISU, and that was actually just something we were discussing last night. As of right now, ISU A is a open, I don't know the designation, we're in open enrollment. And so almost everybody can get into ISU, regardless of the standardized test. ISU, we are considering about what we're going to do with the things like ACT and SAT. Do we as an institution want to bring those back? If we do, how do we want to do them? There are more and more institutions around the country that are just like not worrying about ACT and SAT, because a lot of research out there says that A, they are biased, and B, that they actually don't have any correlation to your success. Your GPA typically has a higher correlation for your success. For ISU's PT program, we do not require SAT, ACT scores. I would have to look it up to see if we even require GRE scores.
For COVID right now, it was waived, but that's, I think, a great question that maybe we could get recircle back from your admissions folks, just because, you know, I mean, things are opening up a little bit more, and if is ISU going to use that again for their PT program? Those aren't updated yet. So the GRE was kind of on that waiver hiatus because of COVID. So they were granting exceptions for students, but so that would be a great question, Tyler, that maybe if you could find out then and report back, that would be really great. We had one other question. So in the past, Idaho State University used to require that your anatomy and physiology, your chemistry sequence, and your physics sequence be a B or better. Is that still in place, or is that changed? And that might be an admissions question that we need to get answered.
I believe on our website, on our admissions website, it does talk about, you need to have a minimum grade for the prerequisite courses. Get higher than the minimum requirement is my recommendation, because you and about 400 people that look like you would, are going to have, very high grades, and you want to be, in that pack of, people that are meeting higher than the minimum requirements. Because if you're just at minimum requirements, you're already kind of towards the bottom of the list. There's going to be a lot of other applicants out there that are having higher grades. And so you want to have as high grades as you can for those prereqs.
I'm going to post in the chat to everyone. So we just posted this. This is our alumni spotlight. Hint, I'll be emailing out to those of you who are alumni that are in this room that are at DPT school right now. But Evan Sanford just graduated last May, and he did our alumni spotlight. And so the students in the room, you're getting that fresh, hot off the press before the newsletter goes out tonight. But please click on that and check it out. And Evan and I talk a lot. So, and hint, I like to talk to my alumni. It's really helpful for us to be able to give another example or another expression of what it's like to go to PT school and also be a practitioner. So it is 4 o'clock and I want to be mindful of everybody's time, but please, if there is maybe one more question to ask, throw it out there. Either chat, vocalize it. All right, well, I hope this was all beneficial for everybody. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank the students for coming. And Tyler, as always, this is a wonderful experience. And so watch for the recording to come